Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, my dear panelists. Thank you all for joining us in the first of many of our IP talks, IP series, talk series. This is the very first. We plan to do a couple more this year, hopefully, if Professor Oro allows us to. We will do, this one is, as you know, the title is Copyright Entertainment Industries in the New Normal. I'll let Prof speak to that when the time comes, but we plan to do a few more, maybe a bit more specific. We may go into publishing, go into image rights, broadcast, general media, collective administration, and things that are impacting our society at the moment. So without wasting too much time, I have 2 minutes, and I know that the back office might mute me if I keep talking. So let me introduce our moderator for this afternoon. He is my mentor, my partner, the founding partner of LMA Legal Consultants. He is a professor of intellectual property in the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. He is the first IP academic to be conferred with the honorary title of a SAN. And without talking too much, Professor Adebambo Adewako, please can you take over? Thank you. I think, Prof, you're still muted.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. The webinar, it's on copyright and entertainment industry in the new normal. We know that every industry now is going through the new normal. It's a new dispensation, so to say. It's also a new vocabulary that we have all come to adopt, and it has evidently brought a lot of uncertainties and disruptions to the traditional norm across industry, and has brought about rethinking of a new normative order, new business models, and more innovative ways of doing things. Of course, creative industry is no less challenged, and the protection they enjoy under existing copyright law. This is really the issue that we want to explore in this webinar organized by LMA Legal Consultants. We have a panel of experts in the field, a very rich blend of panelists from different sectors in the field, industry, academics, regulatory practice, and policy, both in Nigeria and outside the Nigeria. So what I will quickly do is to introduce us to the panelists generally, because we may not have the time to do individual introduction when they start to speak. I will first of all mention Wale Davis, who is an experienced entertainment executive whose career has spanned diverse roles as a performing artist, talent manager, and director. We have also Steve Gukas, who is also in the panel, a top media executive, an award-winning film director, producer, and development consultant, whose films have enjoyed artistic and commercial success around the world. Some of his titles, most of us must have seen that: Namibia, The Struggle for Liberation, 2007, A Place in the Stars, 2014, 93 Days, and of course, most recently, Living in Bondage, Breaking Free. We also have here Foza. Foza is not here, but I will do that in absentia. Oyikan Fawayimi, who is well known as Foza, is a visionary entertainment business leader with solid legal background and impactful years of practical experience spanning entertainment, media, law, management, and transactional expertise. We also have here Aurelia Schultz, coming in all the way from the US. She's a counsel in the Office of Policy and International Affairs at the US Copyright Office in Washington, DC. And she handles, among other regions, Sub-Saharan Africa in our portfolio. We also have Kike Aluko, who is also an entertainment lawyer, like Foza. Is a member of the entertainment and media practice in Greenberg, Traurig, Atlanta, in the Atlanta office. And we have our dear Ayoyemi Lawal Awolo. She's a professor at the School of Law and Security Studies of Babcock, and also in the L&A legal team. Last, of course, but not the least, is John Asen, who is currently the Director General of the Nigerian Copyright Commission, and who again is an expert in his own rights in this field, apart from several achievements over the years. Now, I will start off quickly, and the way I will do this is we have a lot of issues to discuss by way of questions. We find that it's more interesting instead of having some standard conference seminar-like presentation. So we're going to shoot the issue by asking questions. That question will bring the issues up. The first round of questions, we have about 6 minutes each to speak to those questions. And those questions are really overview questions, overview of the landscape from different perspectives of your position, either regulatory or practice or academics or policy and all of that. So the questions will just basically be an overview questions just to set the tone for the deeper issues we're going to discuss. If you permit me, let me just give the honor of the floor to Mr. Jonasen, the DG. Then we'll come to Wale and Steve to give us that background, the industry landscape as practitioners and right holders in the industry. Now, DG, the first issue that I would like you to address is the benefit of copyright reform. In fact, benefit of copyright protection to the creative industry. And the question is, like, we have been on a long journey in this whole field of copyright, over a century of copyright law in Nigeria. And of course, part of that also the copyright reform that is currently going on, has been on for quite some time. And indeed, the entire IP landscape. So as a regulator, what is or are your biggest worry now on the status and the momentum of copyright law and copyright reform that will be of tremendous benefit to the creative industry in Nigeria? What aspect gives you the most concern? Over to you, DG.
Well, thank you very much, Prof. My DG, good to be here, and I thank all the panelists and every participant from across the world. It's a new way of doing things. We are getting used to the new normal. And this is very instructive for the copyright industry. Concerning the reform, I do agree that it's been a long journey. And this present round of reform from 2012 has taken us quite a while. But it's been long overdue ever since Nigeria joined the WIPO treaties or signed those treaties. We had thought that this would have come much earlier. If we had it right, we probably would have wished we were able to revise our copyright laws periodically. But like we all know, the last time we did anything close to a revision, which was just minor amendments, was in 1999. It's been a while. And so we didn't quite respond to the switch when the world became digital. And I think that's probably what informed the new drive to have the copyright law reformed, not just amended. It's also interesting, I mean, in the context of the present pandemic, it's also very interesting because the catastrophic proportion of this COVID-19 has woken us up all up to the realities of the moment. And like I will get to say later, the copyright system seems to be the hardest hit in the IP field, and that should be very instructive. But the good thing about the reform, I do say that it's probably the first time that we'll be having even a reform within a democratic setting. So when we look at the challenges, that should be very instructive. The Copyright Act itself was, the last two, the 1970 Act and the 88 Act, with the two amendments, were all under military regimes. So it was almost like just snap the finger and you get the decree out. So we've never really had an attempt to do it under a civilian or a democratic dispensation, and this is the first time. So that will explain why we are having some of these delays. But I would say that, having said that, the reform has thrown up a few things, and we've been able to use the reform to gauge the political will of the leadership. And it's instructive. Many may not know this. When the bill eventually got to the Federal Executive Council, it was returned. It was returned because everyone felt that the sanctions were not even strong enough. And for me, that was very helpful, because it meant that at the highest level, the leadership saw the importance of copyright. They were very much conscious of the rate of infractions and the need to send very strong signals. So, for instance, in the punishment, rather than have the punishments measured with the minimum threshold or the maximum threshold, they asked for the minimum threshold so that a judge will have a minimum. So he has to go above that, rather than say, okay, not more than 5 years. And no, not less than 5 years, we won't sound better. So that's the kind of law we are having here, to show that there's a strong message on the need to ensure that there's respect for copyright. Now, I know I have limited time, but I will say here that my greatest worry, well, I don't really have much worries, because we had a good buy-in from stakeholders, we had good support. But my worry is attempts to reopen issues and attempt to reopen the whole debate around the bill. If that happens, then we may just be going back and forth, and we never will progress. So it's better to allow things move on, and then when the bill gets to Parliament and is on the floor for the public hearing, we can make further comments. But at the moment, I have strong belief in the system, and I think we'll be there earlier than we thought. But for this pandemic, I'm sure would have gained more traction in this year. Those are my initial thoughts.
Wow, thank you so much, Deji. That's something to really note. That's something to take note of. That's something to take note of. Thank you very much for that introduction. Let me quickly go to Wale Davis, performing artist, recording artist, producer, director. Give us the, give us your thoughts about the entire music industry landscape, foreign artists versus Nigerian artists. What are the notable differences you would say are the experience of an average foreign or American artist and his Nigerian counterpart in the entertainment and in the entertainment space? Do you think there's any significant difference in the understanding of the role of legal protection in performing your art or your craft, as the case may be? And how do you go through this to flourish as a talent in the space?
So first of all, I'd like to say hello to everyone on the panel, everyone that's tuned in, and also thank you for the opportunity to share my own perspective with everyone. I think that the key notable difference is structure. I feel like in a lot of developed music markets like the US and Europe, artists have multiple sources of income. So, I could thrive as not just a performing artist, I could thrive as potentially someone who writes music for other people, who composes music, and those opportunities present different revenue streams. And I think, now that we've seen in Nigeria, what's happening is our collecting societies, I'll focus on that aspect because that's where it directly affects us. Our collective societies have been fighting both external and internal battles for quite some time now. And where you begin to see the effects of these is really during a global pandemic, because I think that, for us as artists, our sources of income have been severely limited. We're not able to perform, and that's a sizable chunk of our revenue gone. We're not able to, brands are not spending money. So even that income that comes in from advertising or commercial partnerships are gone. And I think we now start to see that, yes, we do get some royalty. We're fortunate that the world has gone digital, as the DG said, because we're able now to get some residual income from royalties, streaming royalties, where before, because of the high level of piracy of our music, we weren't able to, if that was in this present moment, it would be a complete shutout for us financially. So at least there's some streaming revenue coming in. And I think, where you now see that in America or in places where there's a developed industry, I feel like artists are still getting residual incomes from multiple, it may be little drops, but those drops are able to sustain in some ways, just on a human level. And I think that, to answer your other question about understanding of the rights, I think creatives in Nigeria have never really had that much cause to engage with the CMOs or the copyright bodies. So our knowledge of how copyrights work, how copyright societies work is very limited. We don't really know, a lot of us don't know what our rights are or what information is needed or what changes are needed to make a tangible impact. So I feel that, this moment is really, this new normal is really affected the creative industry, and the effects of that, depending on how long this draws out from. So for example, in Nigeria, it's a seasonal market where December would be our prime time to capitalize off our work, where we have the highest numbers of shows and engagement with fans to make revenue. If we go into a December where those live events are not able to occur, then 2020 would be almost a write-off for a lot of us. So I feel, yes, to me, I think that would be the key differences. I think it's just in the structure and the supporting ecosystem for artists and creatives.
Thank you, Walide. Thank you so much for that. Structure, awareness of rights, very, very, very instructive points there. Steve, as producer and investor, actually, how do you see the investment environment in the entertainment industry today from your experience in the industry?
Well, the pre or post-COVID now?
Both.
Okay, so I would say that leading up until the beginning of 2020, there was an uptick in both interests and inflow of investments into the entertainment industry. But I'll speak more specific to the film and television industry, which is where I play. And so you have basically two different tranches of investment that you're looking at. You're looking at investments in the production sector, and you're looking at investments in the distribution and exhibition sector. And both of these, we're seeing an uptick. Quite a number of people are investing in the creation of particularly exhibition, new cinemas. We had jumped over a 2-3 year period from having about 20-something locations to having well over 60-something locations. Now, I'm not talking screens now, I'm talking physical cinema locations. And I know that for this year alone, there was a huge projection of the number of cinemas that were going to come on stream. My group is also involved in the building of some of these cinemas that were supposed to come on stream. But all of that has sort of been put at bay by the current situation that we're going through. So that's the exhibition arm of things. And this is fed by just sort of numbers that we're seeing coming out from the exhibitors and the Cinema Exhibitors Society of Nigeria, and sort of figures that they are putting out, comparing that to what the projections were by bodies like PwC, who had projected that, by 2021, we'll be looking at about $22 million in terms of what business the cinema industry will be doing. But that was already surpassed by 2019, which meant that we were performing way ahead of projections. And what that meant was it was gingering a lot more people to say, well, current players to expand and new entrants to sort of come into that sector of the business. So that's where, the cinema business is. In terms of production, also returns on investments on films have improved tremendously, because with the increase in the number of cinemas in the country, viewership and audience uptake, the ticket counts have gone up, box office returns have gone up as well. So you have, even though we're not performing at the levels of the 2016, 2017, 2017, where we've seen returns of over $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million for a film, we've sort of averaged where you're looking at somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million as standard returns for big fair films. And then the average films are looking at something of a return of about $150,000 to $250,000, depending on what level of investment you put into it. The result of that is that it's gingered more people to come into the production space as well. The number of films that were put out last year that were produced for cinema and international distribution was quite high last year. And I know that a number of producers and production companies also had projects in the works. This was also supported by the entrant of Netflix into the Nigerian market. And so you're getting more uptake in terms of additional revenue tranches for products. And so that in itself has sort of, encouraged people to come into the production space. So that too was on an going up, but again, put at bay by the current situation. What I see post this, but even within this climb as well, what has happened to people who have existing content is that content has truly become king, where Netflix has projected it was going to run out of content by a certain period of time. It ran out much earlier and had been sweeping up everything that people have in the market. So people who had understood the rights embedded in their works and protected those were able to then find an additional revenue tranche for their content. So going forward, post-COVID, once the doors are open for production, and they are beginning to open, there would be a rush to try and get more content out into the marketplace. But that again is going to depend on how soon enough we flatten the curve. What are the initiatives that the industry puts in place to ensure safety for cast and crew, so that we can continue to produce content in a very protected way. But by and large, I think that the lay of the land for both production, exhibition, and distribution is really, really quite, what do I call it, positive at the moment. And the likelihood is that we're going to see a continuous growth in this direction.
Thank you, Steve, for that insight. Thank you very much. While Kike is holding on, I will go to Orella next. For Orella, we're going a bit global and a bit going into the American and comparative aspect of our discussion. The US and the Nigerian creative industry share some similarities in terms of the abundance of creative talent in music, in film, and other sectors of the creative industry. Are there any significant aspects of the American copyright administration model that can be of benefit to Nigeria, particularly at this time?
Thank you, Prof. It's a great question, and one I thought a lot about, because I was thinking about What does that mean in terms of copyright administration? And I look at the work that the NCC has done over the years and obviously continues to do. And we know that the NCC is super supportive of the creative industries, same way that the US Copyright Office is here. But I think one of the key differences that I see is here, it's not just our Copyright Office that's supportive and provides information and resources for the creative industry, but really basically the entire government working together as a network. And maybe that's happening there in a way that we just don't see visibly from overseas. But for example, here, our trade representative is very active in that space. Our Small Business Administration, our International Trade Administration, our Customs and Border Patrol, our Department of Justice, all of those kinds of things. And so I think that's the biggest area where if your filmmakers, if your musicians, your producers, your artists, everybody who's involved in the creative spaces can go to the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency and get information and get resources and get grants and like that sort of thing, have those kinds of resources available, have the Ministry of Trade and Investment being involved in policy developments that help create a space that's going to work for artists, so that it's not just one agency on their own focusing on it, but really having a full government network. I think that's the biggest thing we have, at least I don't see from here. So if you do have it, especially if the DG can speak to that, but really having, for the industry to know that there's full support behind them for what they're trying to do and that the country as a whole values it.
Thank you, Orella. Kike, how has the law enabled the US creative industry thrive? And what lessons might be applied for Nigeria to use IP law to nurture its creative industry? How do you see Afrobeat and Nollywood coming up at par with the US counterpart, the Nollywood and the music industry? What opportunities are there for the Nigerian artists to meaningfully participate in the global entertainment economy?
Thank you so much. I would also like to say thank you for inviting me to participate on this webinar, and I'm so excited to participate and learn from each of you. I think in response to your question, Prof, there's a few things, and I think it builds a lot on what I heard from several of the other panelists, in particular Wale's comments. I think there's three main areas. There is a large focus on enabling transactions and encouraging monetization of copyrights, in addition to focusing on enforcement, right? Secondly, as the DG mentioned, there is a large focus, as similar to the updates to the Nigerian copyright law, there is a large focus on digital distribution in response to the growing digital economy. And I think thirdly, there is a keen awareness of the fact that American copyrights, American entertainment products are global, and an effort to put in place structures and resources to help global copyrights thrive, right? So I think one example on the encouraging monetization point is that there is a certain compulsory licensing scheme for certain copyrights, meaning that the copyright owner must issue a license and the user must pay a statutory license fee for use, which is set by law. And it's subject to several requirements, and there's different compulsory licenses for different copyrights. But this stimulates revenue generation, right? And so in addition to a focus on trying to prevent piracy and trying to enforce copyrights, there is an effort to stimulate the production of revenue. I think on the second point, in terms of digital distribution, I think it's quite well known that over the past 2 or 3 decades, the US copyright industry has created a lot of different updates in response to the digital economy. So there's been the creation of the exclusive digital performance right in sound recordings and a compulsory license for non-interactive streaming like digital radio. an organization called Sound Exchange was created and designated by the Copyright Office to collect and distribute royalties from such compulsory licenses. And again, as Aurelia mentioned, this kind of represents a network of organizations and agencies that helped these copyrights to thrive in monetizing their copyrights in the digital age. I think we will be talking about the Digital Millennium Copyright Act a bit later, but that created a safe harbor for online services providers against copyright infringement liability subject to certain requirements for user-generated content. And then most recently, the Music Modernization Act, among other things, created a mechanical licensing collective, which streamlines the process by which digital music services can get compulsory mechanical licenses for the reproduction and distribution of musical composition rights. So it allows for a blanket licensing system whereby one body collects and distributes royalties to the copyright owners. Again, a structural environment which helps to monetize and create copyrights in the digital age. And I think too, you know, the consideration of a global perspective in regards to monetization and enforcement. So we have institutional frameworks like performing rights organizations, which I think are similar to the collecting management organizations that Wale mentioned, for performance rights organizations and songwriters and performers. These organizations have reciprocal agreements with international collecting societies, meaning that when, you know, an American artist's music is played elsewhere, then they can sign up with those organizations to try to ensure that they're getting the royalties from overseas. I think, you know, for Nigeria, my perspective is the main question is what is most appropriate for the needs in the context of the local industry. I think that some things which may have worked in the US may not actually be appropriate for the local industry in Nigeria. But from my personal perspective, everything that I have read and based on my experience in Nigeria, there is an extraordinary emphasis on the enforcement of piracy, which I think is extremely important. At the same time, resources are extremely limited. And so should they all be spent on addressing such a massive problem, or is there also a way to stimulate revenue generation, both within the country and outside of the country in the digital age? So those are just a few thoughts and ideas that I have that I'm interested to hearing from the other panel.
Thank you, Kike, for that perspective. Very useful. Before I go to Professor Arowolo, I will take Foza first. Foza, are you ready? Are you ready? Okay.
Sorry. So I'm gonna have to apologize. I came out of Lagos for an emergency and the network is quite bad. So I have to come back to the main road to be able to get, and so the noise is quite, so the noise might be interfering.
It's okay.
At some point. Okay. Thank you.
Can I come back to you after Prof, or you ready to take your question now?
Yeah, I can take my question now.
Okay, now the question is on entertainment contracts, which you deal with as an entertainment lawyer. Contracts that are very useful from the creative's perspective. So the bulk of obligations, the do's and the don'ts, are typically in the contract. I'm sure you agree with that. So how do you draft it as an entertainment lawyer, be it publishing, be it performance, be it distribution, all kinds of agreement involving the use of content, particularly music and film. From your experience, what is the clause, that clause, maybe one or two, because I don't want you to talk about the whole contract, that you don't want to joke with from the creative's perspective?
All right. So I think
particularly in these days.
So one of the key, as COVID has unraveled itself, one of the key points that from the content owner side that we see that is becoming more like everybody has to come back to the table and have a conversation is the kind of rights that you are licensing out. So it's very important that when you are drafting an entertainment contract, is very specific the kinds of rights that you're giving out. So if it's distribution rights, you have to be very specific that you're giving out the digital digital distribution right, or you can have a physical distribution right. In COVID time, a lot of blank licenses, like Peter mentioned, a lot of blanket licenses have gone out for digital performance rights and everything, but nobody envisaged the live streaming issue. So for an app like Instagram or an app like Facebook, they have the license to use music, but they didn't have the license for live stream. So when you go online to do like an Insta live party or something, it cuts you off after like 30 seconds because they didn't have the proper right. So it's very important because a lot of the entertainment contracts we have here in Nigeria, especially when an entertainment lawyer doesn't look at it for you, is you see a lot of people just give all-encompassing rights and say they kind of like do a generalization that takes with the rights that you have now and the rights that you have in future, and for something as high as like the universe, and not specifically stating territory. In general, when I'm looking at a contract or when I'm drafting a contract for a client, one of the key things I look at is the brand equity of that client, because you need to understand that for the content owner or the content creator, the value is in the brand equity that you have as a person, and that's what gives the IP that you're creating value. So it's always important that for the lawyers in the house, when you are drafting a contract or negotiating a contract on behalf of an IP owner, it's important to take into consideration the brand value of that IP owner, because that's what informs your commercials. And the last one I always pay attention to is the accounting clause, because royalties accounting for IP is quite different. It's an entire scape that's very different, and a lot of auditors or accountants, just like we have entertainment lawyers, we're beginning to have entertainment auditors and entertainment accountants because the royalties are different. So I always pay attention to the accounting clause once again, because when you have your data rights, you have your accounting rights, it trickles back into giving value to the IP as a product that you're selling. So those are the clauses that I generally look out for, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you. Prof, what are the questions have started coming in. So when we get to the question and answer, I will read them out to the panelists. Just want to let you know the questions are coming in. They are really trickling in their droves. Now, Prof, what are the most formidable obstacles for the Nigerian creatives today, whether pre or post-COVID, in terms of legal protection of their creativity? And what would you recommend as the way out? Prof.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. This is what happens when the DG speaks first. He said it all. You now have Wale, you have Steve, Corolia. So speaking last, actually is a blessing in disguise. Well, my DG has said it all. So I'm just going to say, rather than look at it as obstacles, I'm not going to look at it from the perspective of a glass being half full. Being half empty. I'm actually going to look at it from the perspective of a glass being half full. So rather than talk about obstacles, let's look at opportunities. COVID-19 has its own opportunities. And before COVID-19, there were opportunities which I feel the entertainment industry has failed to explore. I might be a bit harsh, but I feel by being more innovative, I think everybody was so reliant on the physical, and they forgot that there's this space that they can feel as well. They can do both, so that in this time, they don't feel the heat as much. So I'm going to start with, the DJ spoke about 1999, which is a very crucial time. But I'm going to start with 1992. You have Living in Bondage, 1992. And I believe Steve knows about Living in Bondage. Is it 2019? So you had Living in Bondage when you had the VHS. Technology was not really high up there. Then you move on. Things seemed okay as far as I'm concerned, looking at the laws and the level of creativity, looking at the corporate content and all that. Things seemed quite okay. Then you got to 1999. I don't know how many people can remember 1999. People thought the world was going to come to an end. It was just about technology. We're moving from one era to another. So we moved into 1999, then from 1999 to 2000, but the law stayed the same. all that happened did not reflect on the laws. And the teacher said so many things regarding challenges and all that in present times and the laws from that time to this time and all that. So we had an opportunity at that time to actually look more at technology and the things that technology could do for us, but not much was done. But gradually we started moving on. Then I remember another time, another crucial thing that happened. I don't know how many of us remember October 1st and Kunle Afolayan, and there was this protest. Before the film came out, pirates had actually gone, and really happy about it. As the pirates were a big thing. It was a big issue, still a big issue, but right now COVID-19 is affecting both the pirates and the producers of film. So everybody, we balance out one way or the other. There's an opportunity here, isn't it? Rather than always offline performances. Wale, why can't we have something in December that you don't need to have a live performance in a hall, but there could be a live performance somewhere and everybody watches across the world. So December is not totally out of it because of COVID-19. I think we need to rise above COVID-19. So moving gradually from 1992, 1999, then sometime in 2000 and something with the Kunle Afolayan matter and all that, I started following Africa on Netflix, and I was really amazed with that. And I said, I'll read this out. And it says, Africa on Netflix. I always say it, stay true to your dream and craft, and the world will be in your palm. The entertainment industry should be in the palms of those who are creators of films, music, whatever it may be. You can do with it as you want. Looking at COVID-19, telling us now that we need to explore that space. I know it will have its own challenges regarding piracy, streaming online. I can't even believe it, but it's happening and all that. But I still believe that there's a whole lot of space there that we are failed to fill regarding the entertainment industry, and it should do something about that. Otherwise, other people will fill that space for us. So for instance, I sometimes go online and I see different types of movies. You have the high budget movies and you have the low budget movies. They're still there. And then sometimes you see these movies on YouTube. That's not the real name of the movie. So you see, I've Googled once and I saw like 100 movies, Nigerian movies, on the billionaire marrying the house help, the billionaire marrying the mistress, the billionaire marrying the driver. And those are not the true names of these movies. Whether it's the people that produced it, that put it on there, whether it's pirates, whether the people that find that there's a space and some people need to watch these movies, but because the right holders are not doing anything about it, then they fill up that space. If you continue to leave that space open, people will fill it up. And technology is always ahead of the law. So there's no way, it will be difficult for the law to catch up with technology, but we need to make that move. And right now, like the DG said, our laws, 2015 copyright bill, I loved that bill. When I saw it, I saw a whole lot of provisions in it and all that. I agree with the DG, we need to move on with it. We should. I would have said, okay, maybe we'll review it and do some things to it. But from his explanation, I think that's something we can still move on with and all that. And again, going back to that Africa on Netflix, I'm going to be really fast so that we'll have enough time. There's this part that was said by Genevieve, and she said, have you ever heard someone tell your story? Take your voice and replace your face until no one else can see or hear. Very soon, if you don't take up that space, someone else will take it up for the entertainment industry in Nigeria, and it won't be the right holders, it will be some other person. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yemi. Thank you. The questions have started they are really increasing in numbers. We need to double up. Let's go to the second round quickly, then we'll go to the Q&A session. DG, you spoke about enforcement, and I think Ike also made allusions to that when she was speaking. With the enormous enforcement powers of the Commission under the existing Copyright Act, what are your plans for the digital space, for digital enforcement, looking at your enforcement powers, particularly now that COVID has forced everybody to that space? Do you have any plans or any rethinking how to re-strategize your enforcement powers digitally now?
Well, thank you very much, Prof. It's
I think COVID has, first of all, Arolo mentioned this clearly. The COVID pandemic has also opened us to see some realities. And I think we can leverage on the positive side of things. And one of the things it has thrown up is the need to police the online space even more than ever before. Quickly, I will just give two illustrations here. And this happened last week, or this week. First, someone called and says, oh, he's found an e-library being run by a government ministry, and they have on it books by Nigerians and by foreigners, foreign works and Nigerian works, and they're downloadable. So I did a quick check on it, and I found that indeed I could download some of those titles. And I found that just unacceptable. So immediately we had to do a letter to the ministry, in fact to the minister, and we are following up on that to say, look, bring down these books or you shut this site while we'll investigate. And I know how these things work. Someone may have gone there with some proposal on providing e-libraries, and they thought there had been some rights clearance. And the ministry now finds itself in a situation where it's the one carrying bringing pirated works for people to use. The other one is actually about my own works, because I got a notification that there was something about my book online, and I go there and I find a chat room, and someone is asking where can he find my book, and the other one says, oh, I can give you some copies. Before I knew it, I read down when I saw PDF versions, EPUB versions, all versions. Someone just gratuitously gave like 3, 4, 5 versions of that book. Well, it was like a wow. Now, I wasn't really hurt, but it got me thinking that, okay, maybe there's a gap here. I should have changed my business model to be able to meet the reader where they can get the books. And someone mentioned this earlier, that we are moving away from the physical to the digital. So businesses must also be conscious of that and meet, fill that gap. Now, from the copyright side, we must begin to help the businesses to switch safely and have an ambience, a business environment where they can be comfortable with that platform of exploitation. Beyond that, and this is what we are doing at the moment, we'll set up an online enforcement unit. It's like a strategic online enforcement unit. And what we intend to do is to place people that will be online, from 8 to 5, 24/7, they'll be policing online. I like what Yemi said about the kind of things you find on YouTube and all that. We've reached out to YouTube. We're having a discussion with them to see how we can have a fast track so that we can actually do the policing and inform them. But when you pursue online, it can be very daunting, a task. So this is where the collaborations come in, because sometimes these sites are not hosted in Nigeria, the URL are not Nigeria. And Ura mentioned this, that we're already having some good collaboration with the US agencies. So we want to see how we can increase the collaborations, provide the structures here in Nigeria, alert the right owners so they have a one-stop shop where they can come and make complaints and get someone to police those works. But I think we must do more work policing. And this is one area where we don't have to wait for complainants to come to us. We must be a step ahead. Frankly speaking, it pains me when I see people release their work today and the next moment it's everywhere. So we must be one step ahead of that and do this for them even before they complain. So this is a lesson we have learned, because people now have gotten used to the COVID model of doing things online. This is going to move even after COVID. So there's going to be a lot of more online activities. People have gotten used to virtual environments. So if we don't move ahead of them, we'll find ourselves, with this huge, monstrous thing online that will destroy the whole entertainment and copyright industry. So what we're doing now is to set up those structures post-COVID to be able to police and be a step ahead
if not a step ahead of the pirates, but at least work with the rights owners to ensure that we are able to bring down as many works as possible by the day.
These are very important information and insights we've had from our panelists. I want to invite our participants to let the questions keep coming in. We'll make sure that we answer all the questions that you have asked. Back to Wale. You have promoted Afrobeat, alternative music, across the world over the years. What prospects for this music now and the artist on the global stage? In your intro, you just introduced us into that, but can you speak a bit more for about 2-3 minutes about that?
Yes, so I think that what you've seen in the last few years, at least in the music space, you've seen a lot of DSPs, so digital service providers, come into the space, actively try and put boots on ground in Nigeria and Africa. You've seen a lot of record labels come back into the space as well. A lot of them have been in Nigeria in the 80s and 70s, but now they've seen the opportunities because of now digital has democratized the process, so I feel they've all come back now and they've seen opportunities with Nigerian music traveling in the last few years to a lot of global, a lot of different countries around the world, so I think that, and like Prof said, I feel that, with COVID, another thing, I do view it as an opportunity as well, because I think it has shown not just in the music industry, but across all industries that we have fully left the industrial age and we're fully in the technological age. If we ever doubted that before, now is the time. So companies are seeing that their effectiveness is not necessarily stopped by people doing Zoom meetings. They have all the tools to check if you're online and sending your emails as you should do. So I feel that we're fully made that leap now, and this has just fast-tracked that leap in a lot of ways. And just to add to what the DG said as well, I also feel that, because of this influx of these companies, we are also noticing best practice that they're putting in place. So, for example, on the publishing side, registering, a lot of Nigerian artists now have started registering with collection societies globally, so in the US and the UK, because they feel that, that they are able to, as they're entering this global marketplace, they're able to police for us and help us generate revenue. And I think studying some of the models that they use, you can see that there's technology that they've really embedded into the system where, they're using technology to track rights, to track, you have unique codes and unique numbers that apply to your music. So if it's played anywhere, they then tap into their network and see, and you generate revenue from that. Also on the YouTube as well, so some of the new models of distribution, it's not necessarily just the old record label model. Now what we have are distribution companies increasingly in the space. So they would put your music on all these digital platforms and amplify it on the platforms for you. But they equally also ask you to sign over some elements of rights for them to police. So for example, we put our music through a platform on YouTube. They then would alert you when any copyright infringement of that music has been made. But they've also flipped it in a way where they sometimes allow that copyright infringement, but monetize it so that, if these people get you 1 million views, that money is coming to you as the rights holder. So I think that, there are different ways to look at how best to approach it. I think in some instances, what we've decided to do as content makers is maybe embed marketing opportunities. So if that content goes out for free, the advertisers have already paid us to place the product into the content. So that just increases their visibility. I think as we're entering this field now, all of these things are fascinating, and I feel it's really important that, as the music goes on to these global markets, we also find a way to, one, maintain some level of ownership within our content, but also apply, learn as well from what is happening in a lot of developed countries, just in terms of best practice. I also think that, for me, as the Netflixes, the Apple Musics, the Spotifys, as they put their footprints on the continent, I think that this also provides a different opportunity, because now the songs that are being featured on Netflix films that are now being played in America or being played in the UK or Europe. So what now happens, people Shazam these songs, people want to then license these songs for other things, or find out more about the artist. So it also presents opportunities on that side. So like Steve said, I feel like for the music as well, in a post-COVID reality, I think that the opportunities for growth are big. I do feel, like Prof said, that we need to begin to create our own networks and our own communities so that we maintain ownership of our story. I think that's very, very key. So, and we have no excuse now, because we can connect with people in South Africa, in Kenya, in Ghana, and also build, communities online. We don't need to, we can have board meetings like this, where we decide on the next moves or even on the creative process. So I feel that, the opportunities are good. And I feel we do need to capitalize on these opportunities now as we move forward.
Steve, for an industry that is primarily driven by private funds, do you support regulatory intervention or stimulus packages, the kind that we've had in the last couple of weeks during the COVID, for the creative industry, generally, of course, specific to the film industry? Is this going to be significant for the industry at this time? Or do you have any other ideas on how to support the industry?
Okay, so I would say yes on both counts, but then I will also put a caveat to that it depends on what it is that the intervention is. Strengthening things like copyright regulation, enforcement, and the rest is still regulatory. And that is a welcome thing, for government to take strong interest in that. Creating the enabling environment for the industry to thrive, even be it creating avenues for promotion of work in terms of a collective on behalf of the industry, is also sort of regulatory intervention that would be welcome. But in terms of actual financial intervention in the industry, that too is something that is very, very needed in the entire Europe, in the Western world. Funds exist that are meant to support and promote arts and culture, which is a country's way of putting its own voice on the conversation table at any point in time, anywhere in the world. And so countries take an active interest in promoting those. Nigeria doesn't seem to be very good at doing that. We have a culture ministry that does very little in the promotion of culture in terms of what is existent, in terms of content and rights. And we have an information and information ministry that sometimes is part of the culture ministry that does very little in that sphere as well. The Nigerian Film Corporation is under the Federal Ministry of Information, does very little for the promotion of the film industry as a whole. The support structure, in fact, sometimes they barely have enough to just pay their own salaries. And so if we have that kind of body that exists just to pay its salary and do nothing else, then we could do without that body. But it is a very, very needed body, because film commissions all over the world are a strong driver of the film industry, as is the culture ministry as a strong driver of culture in general, which is theater, film, television, music, and the rest of it. And so on that side, that sort of regulatory intervention is required. On the financial side, we've had two government interventions. The first was during the Jonathan administration, where we had a 200 million naira, I think it was, intervention that was given to, that was more of a grant, and it was given to production, it was given to distribution and training. And that gingered the industry to some degree, but was very little in terms of what it could do, because 200 million naira, actually, by the time you break that down, does very little. We have a reincarnation of that now under the current administration from the CBN, but this time it's a loan. And that's again another, I think, 200 and something million naira as well, or 2-point-something billion, sorry, naira that is available to the industry. But it's now being given through commercial banks. And again, the conditions that you need to meet before you can access that loan shows a clear lack of understanding of how the industry operates, and shows that the industry itself was not consulted in the process of that creation. Because what it then means is that even though the fund exists in name, not a lot of people are able to access it. So again, it does nothing for the industry. So yes, there is a need for that, because if you look at it very well, the numbers that the industry provides employment for is huge. But what it provides by way of service as well, aside from just the employment and the numbers that it does, just the entertainment and psychological service value that it has, by particularly in these COVID times, being able to move people from worrying about what they are but getting entertained, is in itself a function that requires to be recognized. So both in terms of GDP and in terms of social service function, it is a very important industry. And therefore, the same way that we'll put forward intervention for agriculture, intervention for aviation, and the rest of the other industries, it is very important that that intervention is put in place for the movie production industry. And if you look at it from a point of view where you're trying to understand what the value chain that exists in the industry are, you would realize that you don't have to give me money to make a film if you create the enabling structure that when I make a film would ensure that I make returns and profit on my investment. So therefore, that level of support would be required more in exhibition and distribution. Because if I put out a film today and it's going to go out on 36 locations across Nigeria, the returns in terms of revenue is far, far higher than what I can consider currently. So when a film has made 350 million naira in returns, actually, if you look at it, no Nigerian film has been viewed by 500,000 people in a cinema. But if we had cinemas across the country and 1 million people were able to view one film, look at the returns on that film. That means that for 93 days, for example, we would have made very easily 1-point-something billion, 2 billion. I would have done 3-4 other films by now. But because that infrastructure support is not in place, it limits what I can do. And therefore, I'm always then looking for the money to make the next film. So actually, I don't need support from government to make a film. I need support from government to create the enabling structures that when I make a film, it will find a market. But thankfully also, the other revenue streams that are now available, we're talking about the online, the streaming platforms and all of those, have increased the revenue tranches that a film now has. And the film continues then to have legs in different markets at different times. We still receive revenue checks for 93 days from all over the world, almost on a monthly basis right now. And that's sort of thing that we require, that you're able to create that environment where things can thrive and returns can come to the industry. But I think that yes, regulatory intervention is required to create that enabling environment, and funding that is provided to support the industry is required to create the structures that would ensure that the industry can monetize whatever it creates.
Okay, so while Fosa is holding on, I will go to Kike now as we move very quickly to round up this round. For the questions are really, there are a lot of questions on the line. How have you seen the US entertainment industry respond to the COVID pandemic? What ways have you seen artists and brands innovate during this time as important lessons for Nigeria?
Yes, thank you for that question. It's a good one. And I think, the impacts that I've seen are the same as the impacts globally that many have been mentioned on this panel. It's become very unsafe to hold large gatherings of people, meaning that film and TV content shoots have been delayed, movie theaters, Broadway, sports games have been canceled or postponed, concerts have halted, independent venues are really struggling. As Wale mentioned, the live events industry has been hit extremely hard. However, in light of looking at this as an opportunity, more people are spending more time at home than ever before. And the opportunities are huge to deliver content to eyeballs. This means that, like content licensing and streaming services have seemed to be a bit more insulated and they haven't suffered as much. Now, as has been mentioned before, most revenue, at least from the music side, comes from live performances. So they are needing to find other sources of revenue to kind of supplement the revenue that's been lost. One thing that we've seen from a government perspective and even just kind of industry bodies, there have been relief funds established by the entertainment industry to sort of help those creatives who have been hardest hit, who have lost their sources of revenue. But also we've seen that online platforms have presented a really good opportunity for creatives to innovate. And it seems to have put into overdrive some trends that have already been happening even before the pandemic. So for example, we all know that breaking music on TikTok was already kind of a trend. I think this has kind of pushed that into overdrive. An example is the Don't Rush Challenge, which actually originated in Nigeria. And it traveled all the way here from Nigeria with Young T and Bugsy, who are both in the UK. It traveled all across the globe, but that's one great example of breaking a song by capitalizing on just people's kind of boredom from being at home and having to look at a screen all the time. I think similarly, you've seen, as had been mentioned before, there's been a lot of use of Instagram with live parties and DJ sets and things like that. There has been a very popular Versus series put on by Timbaland and Swiss Beats, whereby you'll have two artists or producers kind of exploit their catalog and promote kind of their old songs, which is actually a great opportunity for older artists to get additional catalog exposure. I think you've also seen brand sponsorships of live virtual event performances, which again, like Professor said, is a way for brands to perhaps reach a global audience of eyeballs in addition to or instead of a live concert that is simply limited to one geographic location. So it's not a perfect replacement, but we have seen some innovations happening. I think on the film and TV side, you've seen early release dates plus releasing straight to video like Netflix instead of releasing in theaters. For example, Hamilton was released a year early on Disney Plus yesterday. And we've also seen just the creation of remote content. So for example, Saturday Night Live is producing their skits kind of in their homes and exhibiting them, remotely. I think the question is going to be which business models will be able to sustain this prolonged hit to the industry and which innovations will be more permanent. But again, to underscore the kind of running theme that I'm hearing, I think it presents a huge opportunity to innovate business models and use these online platforms as a way to continue to reach audiences and or reach new global audiences that may not have been reached before.
Let me go to Foza now. I'm told also that the panelists can actually type very brief answers to those questions if you can see them. Can you see some of those questions? So you can actually type them. Of course, you can still speak to those questions if we have the time, just a way of saving time when we come to the Q&A session. Foza, I know you are an entertainment, of course, IP lawyer, but do you see, creatives have really come to rely on copyright and IP law more than ever before. But do you see them being 100% protected by the law, by IP law now, or do you think that they can find some other ways of protection outside IP law from your experience as an entertainment lawyer?
So like I was answering in the comments section, I'm saying that even all around the world, right? Like even on the ranking of the country with the highest piracy, it's still the US followed by Russia, right? And what you find out is that even in the midst of piracy, they figured out a way to still maximize to the fullest potential the exploitation of the IP that they have. So it's a combination of both legal, a combination of education, a combination of technology that helps to ensure the highest maximization or exploitation of a particular content. Now, the usual behavior of the African artist or the African creator is that they never pay attention to their business, right? And this happens everywhere as a typical Nigerian in every industry that we have. So you don't put the proper structures in place, which includes your accounting, your legal, your management. So you give your, let's say, for example, you give your film to a distributor, you give your a film to a distributor or your music to a distributor, and you never go and check what platforms you license it to. You never check how much he has made, what territory is he distributing to, what kind of license are you doing? And you expect that magically one day you wake up and you see it on QQ in China, and you start getting upset and you say you want to sue QQ in China. Meanwhile, the contract that you signed when you were using TuneCore, for example, you gave away your publishing, you gave away your distribution without properly reading or giving a lawyer to review what you are looking at. So a typical example of what we are doing right now with my law firm and the company we work with is a lot of the older artists. So you have the guys that had like 700 albums, 500 albums. So you're looking at the Fuji artists, the iLife artists, and they signed agreements with their physical distributor, and they gave them the right to physically distribute. Now, what happened was when physical distribution was plunging, a guy from Ukraine came into Nigeria, went into Alaba, gave people 500K and collected all this album and put them online. So now, when everybody's moving online, we're looking and saying, who gave you, so there's a company that is signed to Sony that has the right to distribute, and we're all looking like, who gave you the right to collect or to distribute these songs online? And when we traced it took us a year to trace it. And when we traced it, we found out that one guy came into Nigeria, they sent him, and he came and he took everything. And these Fuji guys and these iLife guys, they have so many albums. And when they say, oh, I gave it to this person in Alaba, and when we trace the agreement, we see that it's only physical rights that they gave them. So you've been making money from a right that you were not entitled to. So what COVID has done is, because of the main source of income for everybody, which is for film, let's say cinema was the main source of income. For music, for the music artist, it was performing. So now they are forced to now look for the other. They are forced to look for the other forms of. They are forced to look for the other forms of income that is attributed to them. So now everybody's paying serious attention to. What was the distribution deal I signed? Who is collecting my money? How much have I collected from this and stuff? So I feel like the law has to view on, because we have so many laws in this country, but we have the problem of enforcement. And this is where young lawyers have to come into play. And this is one of the conversations that we'll have to have with like the DG is in terms of policing. My company, we do a lot of policing and copyright management. I've done case studies where I have IP that I manage that you can't find online because we've employed technology. So we have one man that just sits down, one lawyer that sits down and looks for where are they exploiting my work, which platform is using my work, and we bring it down, we write to them, we collect our, whatever it is, we audio lock it and all that. So it's important that, we have young lawyers that are coming out that necessarily don't know exactly what to do. We can put these people down, just like what we have in the Copyright Act, which is copyright inspectorate. We can train these people to be inspectorates for the digital space to increase digital policing. And with other technology efforts and education and all that, I feel like we can bear to the barest minimum, reduce, piracy in the digital space and even in the physical space as it is. So, yeah.
Thank you. Orella, quickly, the US Copyright Office, any new or particular legal innovation that is going on there in the light of the COVID? that may be sustained post-COVID as an important takeaway for the Nigerian creative industry?
Thank you, Prof. And if I may have the liberty, I'd like to, first, before I turn to your question, just kind of highlight some of the things I've heard some of the other panelists say, and if that's all right. Okay, thank you. And I wanted to do that by sharing a short story. This past year, I went to test drive a new car, well, a used car, and I turned on the radio to see if it worked. And DeVito's Fall was on the radio. And I turned to my friend Shola, who had come with me in the back seat. And I was like, do you hear this? Like I was so excited. But also, it was last year. Think about when that song came out. So it's like, as Kike and the DG and Steve were saying, we need to facilitate the market. So I was super excited that DeVito was on our radio, but why did it take 2 years to get here? So why isn't the market facilitating that better? And I think in terms of the digital developments that we're seeing, as Prof was saying, how these are opportunities and things are here and they're going to stay and this is going to be the future. And we need to facilitate that. As the DG mentioned, I think that really seeing Nigeria implement the WIPO Internet treaties that were signed so long ago is really going to play a huge role in that. So I'm excited to watch that happen and to see these gaps being filled and the market being opened up. And really, as Steve mentioned, if the facilitation to the market is there, then a lot of the other problems will be solved because that'll help create the revenue and the income. Turning to your specific question at this time, Prof, it kind of falls in line with what Kike was saying about how the COVID experience has accelerated trends that we were already seeing. The same's been true for our work in the office. We were actually already in the middle of a large modernization effort. We have a new department that, well, not so new anymore, but we had established a new department, the Copyright Modernization Office. We were really focusing on modernizing the office's systems and services for the public. And COVID has caused us to accelerate that even more, work on that even harder than we were. We were already focusing on it a lot, but suddenly we really had a need for everything to be online. So our registration system has been online for quite a while, like Nigeria has an online registration system. But our office facilitates a lot of other activities such as recordation of transfers, different licenses that need to be recorded, all kinds of things like that. And a lot of those systems were not available online. They were still paper-based, where you to mail something in, somebody typed it into the system and back and forth. So we've really been accelerating our work to get all of that up and online. Congress authorized the register with new regulatory authority for emergencies. That's now part of the law, so that's going to stay. So while we have that authority now during COVID, if in the future, if there are other similar emergencies that are declared, the register will have that ability to step in, change timelines, give people more time and more space and more ways to do their rights. And I think one thing that's nice for the Copyright Commission is the Copyright Commission in Nigeria is much more of a regulatory agency than our office, so they probably already have a lot of that flexibility, and just being able to use that and making sure that when the people who need to use the services, when they're suddenly more limited in how they can use the services, really facilitating what's available so that they can come in and keep doing what they need to in terms of registering, recordation, or just accessing the resources of the department.
Thank you. There's some questions I will take at this point. Some of them are very similar to some of the remaining questions we have. There's a question here that I will direct to Professor Yemi, but just before that, there's a question here for Kike, and I would like Kike to answer that question because it's from your presentation that the question was asked. It said, haven't mentioned the tensions between monetization and enforcement. How do you think smaller artists will benefit from monetization rather than enforcement? And just before you answer that question, the question for Professor Arolo will be, can a law prohibit a copyright owner from exploitation of his rights? Can the law prohibit, or how can the law prohibit a copyright owner from exclusive exploitation of his own right? I think the question...
It's a bit funny.
Exactly. I
Yeah,
don't know.
actually,
But
the law protects.
Exactly. I leave that to you. But
Okay.
I see a question here for Wale, but I can't see the question again. So, Kike, can you take that question?
Yeah, so it sounds like the question is the tension between monetization and enforcement with a
Yes.
lens towards smaller artists. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So I think it's a really good question, right? And I'm not sure that I have a direct answer, but I will tell you issues that it raises in my mind, right? So when I think about enforcement, I think about the level of resources that are required to effectively enforce, right? And at least from my perspective, larger companies, larger corporations, and larger, more successful artists have the most resources to effectively enforce and police their copyrights, right? Smaller companies and smaller artists are a bit more resource constrained. So to the extent that there is a lot of piracy happening, from my perspective, I think that larger and more resourced entities are better positioned to enforce, right? I also think that in a similar sense, in terms of monetization is likely most helpful for smaller entities and smaller artists, right? Because they're the ones that are more resource constrained. And so when I think about, I'm not an artist, but I seek to kind of enable artists to do their work and to create their work and to spend their time creating and trying to distribute, right? And so my general approach, I think, to smaller artists is, okay, what can we do to help you build your business, to help you build your distribution, to help you build your audience? And should those resources, the limited time and energy and effort that you have available, should that be spent on chasing pirates, and or maybe should it be spent on seeking to take advantage of and capitalize on distribution that's already out there? I really like what Wale said about, kind of entering marketing opportunities into kind of free or unauthorized distribution, right? And so, you could spend a lot of resources kind of trying to prevent or take down unauthorized distribution, and or perhaps you could maybe know and understand that such unauthorized distribution will take place. And so what can you do to capitalize on that opportunity? Is it a form of aggregation of an audience such that maybe brands are willing to pay you for access to the audience that you have? And so those are kinds of the things that I think about when thinking about the tension between enforcement and monetization from a smaller artist perspective. I hope that's helpful.
All right. There's a question here. I think I'm going to put that question to Steve because it came out from Steve's very insightful comment. He made over 500,000 cinema views. And the question is, what about streaming in Nigeria? Any better? Just before you do that, there's a question that is waiting for Prof. And I'm going to add another question for DG. Let me just throw that question in and I'll come back to Steve to answer the question. The question for DG, again, came out from Steve's last answer when he answered the question on intervention, regulatory intervention, and stimulus package. The question, I think, is a very important question here. It says, we are witnessing the award of substantial damages. It's a new judicial trend. Well, I don't know whether it's new, but there's a judicial trend now towards enhanced award of monetary damages in copyright infringement cases, 2 billion, 500 million. What do you think is happening here, DG? And the last one was this Zain one of 2 billion early in the year. Is this a function of enhanced judicial notice of the economic value of IP in Nigeria, or is this just circumstantial? Are we seeing this trend as an emerging trend, or is it just going to be one-off season and nothing will happen next? Okay, DG, please hold on to that. Prof, can I come to you? Are you ready for the answer for that?
Yes, I don't know if I got it correctly, but maybe I should just let the person know that if you are the copyright owner and you're and not somebody else, except you're looking at some other form of law, and I doubt it. Copyright gives you exclusive rights against any other person. So you have the right to give permission to somebody who wants to reproduce your work, adapt your work, translate your work. You have total authority over that work. I need to say this, not all lawyers are copyright lawyers or IP lawyers. You need to know that. And then not all lawyers that say they're IP lawyers or copyright lawyers are really IP lawyers or copyright lawyers. And I don't know why there's this trend in Nigeria of people in the entertainment industry or the creative industry being scared of lawyers. You need them to help you. The DJ said it, Foza said it. One, piracy is there, but we don't top the list. Then other countries follow, as well as the technology, and then as well as policing. The DJ has said it, not just NCC can police your rights. You need to police your rights as well and do something about it. So you have exclusive rights, and I don't know of any law that will prohibit the rights that are meant for you. That's the answer I have.
Steve, are you there?
Yeah. Yes, I'm here.
Streaming, the question is, what about streaming in Nigeria? And you have anything to say about that in the current circumstances?
Well, the thing is that the streaming platforms don't release their numbers. They don't share their numbers. Netflix doesn't share what numbers your film has done in terms of numbers of people who have seen it. But one would expect that, given the spread, the coverage of streaming platforms like Netflix, that both people within Nigeria and the diaspora and non-Nigerians all over the world get to have access to content that usually they wouldn't have. So I would wager to say that a lot more people get to see any content that goes onto those streaming platforms, but the numbers are officially unavailable.
DG.
It's a very interesting question, and I'll be very careful with my answer here. Whether the high damages we are seeing now is circumstantial or it's a function of the enhanced judicial notice of the economic value of IPR, my hunch is that it's circumstantial. But in some way, it comes with mixed feelings. First, we're happy to see that courts are more willing to award high damages. When in 1980, Justice Begori awarded the damages in ICIC, we thought that was very high. When we saw the one in Daily Times, we thought it was very high. But we've seen very high figures in recent times. Now, I'm being careful here because some of the cases are either on appeal or they're still very fresh. So I wouldn't comment on specifics. But my general observation is that, and this is probably where one is worried, is that some of the judges that award very high damages often do not sufficiently interrogate the facts to be able to give one some comfort as to how those figures were arrived at. And if you look at the 3 or so cases that have come out recently with very high figures, the figures have almost always been what the plaintiff asked for. So I think this is also a function of some gap in the advocacy, or maybe where the defendants are not able to put up good counter arguments. So the plaintiff will have his way. There is one that came out, which again is very interesting, because the plaintiff in that case had actually asked for general damages and special damages, and the judge awarded special damages, very high figures, and there were no particulars of the special damages that were awarded. So that gives one some worry. What I really want to see is a holistic growth and development of the jurisprudence in a way that we can build on precedents, rather than have these spikes that come and it looks like a fluke. But having said that, we are happy that the judges are more forthcoming in terms of awarding high damages. It would have been okay if some of those damages were actually punitive, because sometimes the judges don't say it's additional damages, they don't say it's punitive, and they just award damages. So that doesn't really help the jurisprudence. So I think it would be good to have some empirical basis, some credible basis for those damages being awarded. Even though we know that general damages are at large, judges should still be able to explain how they've come about that. And we should be clear as lawyers whether they're general damages or special damages. But I guess for the industry, it's good news. But for the law, there's so much that needs to be done. And I think lawyers should do more in that area. Just on a last note, I will also say that the right owners should also know when to approach a specialist. Because when you have a lawyer who is a general practitioner and who is not an IP lawyer or a copyright lawyer for that matter, there might be a lot of gaps in the defense, in the processes or in the arguments, and that often leads to this kind of avalanche and this kind of high damages that I think may not really last for long. Those are my general comments. I don't want to be too specific. Thank you.
Yeah, that was really great. That's why I'm really so excited about this panel. A lot has gone, a lot of information and insight has gone. There's a question here. I found the question for you, Wale. I'm going to read it out. Then there's a follow-up question for Steve, while Wale is thinking about this. I would like to ask Wale if he can be specific on the structure and supporting ecosystems that affect artists, creatives, especially for the upcoming ones. I think that was based on your initial comment when you spoke eminently on the structure. For Steve, this is how can an average Nollywood lover get access to old movies unlicensed to Netflix or Iroko? Okay. I think I will ask Prof this one because it's a student of law here. He says, what advice will you give a student of law looking to carve a niche in the entertainment law and IP field? I think that's just perfect for you. Should I come to you quickly, Steve?
It's okay, yeah.
Yes. How can an average Nollywood lover get access to old movies unlicensed to Netflix or Iroko?
That is a tough question because I know producers who don't even have copies of their own films. You know, it was edited on one format. That format has gone into extinction. They can't find it. They don't. So even the producers of those films don't have the film. So it's hard to say if the film is not available on any of these platforms. In this day of social media, maybe it would be better to find the producer online and reach out to them directly to say you're looking for this film or that film. and they probably be able to point you to. Because short of saying, go to Alaba and go through the treasure trove of what they have there and see if you can find it, I can't say really there's one space. Again, that brings us to question to what is happening to our library and archival system, particularly with the NFC. I mean, I take a lot of issues with the NFC because I think that they are lacking and failing in a lot of the services that they should provide. It would have been very easy to say the archives at NFC would have that film, but I can't say that with confidence. So my suggestion would be find who the producer is. Most likely they will be on social media, find their handles and reach out to them. If not, then just keep praying that they find a market and put it out and you would then get it. Sad, but that's all I can say.
All right. Thank you. Just before Prof answers the question, there's a question here I will put to, I think, Fosa. Really, I'll put this question to Fosa because there's no specific. It's assuming the lockdown or pandemic still persists till the end of the year, how feasible will it be? And what are those significant issues that must be dealt with in terms of copyright, revenue generation, etc., for performing artists to organize a live streaming concert in December? Now, not just Fosa, I think Wale might just want to have a bite on that as well. But Professor Yemi, can you just respond to that question quickly?
I'll just advise the students to do WIPO DL 101 first. Still keep that aspect of your life. You love music, love it, but try with WIPO DL 101 and you take it from there. And then if you're still, I don't know which university you're in, if they offer IP in that of the creative world. That's my answer to the question.
Steve, no, Fosa, sorry.
Hello? Yeah.
Yes.
So just follow a bit of follow-up to what Prof. Yemi said. First of all, I know there are lots of uni that don't offer IP. So word of advice, come to Babcock University and go and study your law there. That's one. I think also there's a lot of opportunities for young lawyers now, especially with like one of the things I discussed, there's a new aspect of IP coming out that we discovered that we need a lot of lawyers for, which is called we call it now IP valuation, specifically for film and music, and we have IP managers, portfolio managers. So these are different segments that you want to check out for under entertainment law and IP. So for me as an entertainment lawyer, I'm more of a music lawyer, and also in film, I do music in film. So it's very important also that you're very clear which segment of entertainment law or IP law that you are very interested in, so that you can become an expert in it. Now, going to the question that Prof asked me. So a lot of us have been doing a lot of business model shifting and getting ready for December, because when the pandemic started, going from history, from the last pandemic we had, it took almost like four years, for everything to normalize properly into a new normal. And we saw a lot of trends that came up. So a lot of the things that we've been doing is following with history and also looking into the future, the things we can, shift. And one of the things that we've figured out is that virtual concerts is going to become a thing. So one of the biggest concerts in Africa that happens is the Experience, and the Experience has started preparing for a virtual concert. And what we see now is, gleaning from what the US, are doing, you see a lot of set creation or set design to create an experiential value, that makes it different from what you see on Instagram or what you see on the regular YouTube. Is to create an experience where people can lock in and experience that concert. So a lot of set designers are beginning to see a lot of work. A lot of graphic designers are beginning to, tap into that space. But for the lawyers, a lot of what we're doing now is that now it's important that set lists are being adhered to. Now, in the physical world, in Nigeria, we had an issue with set lists. in a standard world, when you go to perform, in the standard world, when you go to perform, you have to submit a set list where you go and clear, the rights with whoever needs to be cleared with, especially the CMO. And once you are done with that tour or you're done with that concert, you submit your sorry, can you guys hear me? Sorry. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, okay. So what we usually have is that you have the set list submitted to the CMO to ensure, publishing is properly paid to all the songs that are listed on the set list. But what we have here in Nigeria is that people don't adhere to the set list. So you have a lot of jagbajances going on. A quota will pay for use of music without having proper set list to be able to match the data. But with virtual concert now, we have a real opportunity. And many of us that we know and we're educated and we want the progress of the industry, and we're not people that want to see the downgrade of the industry for our own capitalistic view. A lot of us are beginning to push set list clearance, where if where we have for example, I work with a band called Alternate Sound, and we want to do a concert in October. In November, we're beginning to speak with labels and publishers, the list of songs we want to perform, and we're clearing it. And once we are done with that, we submit to the collecting society that we're affiliated with. And because it's going to be a paid concert, we're looking for the best partner, either through Facebook Live or through YouTube Live, whichever one it is, or whichever platform we figure out that can accept, like, where you can pay to watch that experience. The set list, is matched with that CMO, and we want to see how that will progress. So that's an opportunity that I think would be very interesting, to create a new form of revenue for artists. So I'm hoping that works, and I hope that works out properly well. But a lot in the US, there's a lot of blanket licensing going on platforms like Facebook Live, on platforms like, I don't know what YouTube Live is doing right now, but there's a lot of that opportunity going up. So it's not a bleak situation. It's always going to be a creative. Your team has to be creative. Your business manager, your lawyers, everybody has to be creative to be able to enjoy the revenue that comes from this new normal.
Thank you. Can you believe we've spent almost 2 hours? And I can't take all the questions, but I have, there's a question for Kike, and I'm looking for that question. If I find it, I'll let you know. Wale, do you want to chip in there on that quickly? Very quickly.
Really quickly, two things I would say. I agree exactly what Foza said. I feel that we as artists, we found ourselves in weird situations where, for example, we do online performances on Instagram, and we play our own music, and we're given notifications and warning that we're playing copyrighted music. So I mean, like, we've had to engage with digital service providers to figure out the best way to approach utilizing their platforms. I feel like for upcoming artists, they also there might be some conversations to be had about how they potentially monetize and receive payment for these concerts that they may do in December on the back end. But I feel technology is literally there, and and I feel they should reach out. The other question about the supporting ecosystem, I'll quickly touch. For young artists, I feel you need to understand that you have different sorts of royalties: performance royalties, mechanical royalties. And so if you're getting money from streaming, that's one thing, but you should also be getting money from, like, your publishing of your music. And I'm not sure many people are aware that even exists in Nigeria. A lot of producers we work with say, I offer them publishing, as an incentive on paying for records. And they're like, I don't even know what that is. Just give me 10% or whatever, So I think a lot of people still need a lot of education with that. And also those ecosystems need to be put in place. But I also think there are additional ecosystems that need to be put in place. Like Steve said, supporting the enabling environment to thrive. One quick thing I would say is, if live is one of our main ways of making money, and a specific thing the governments can get involved in is, look at Muri Okonla is used as a park where we stage concerts in December. I think that there can be some support. It's been consistently happening for years now. So I think there could be some support in terms of like handling some of the production costs. Maybe a stage is set there, move there in December. Maybe that's offset. So because artists like me, we can probably afford to go and pay for a stage and equipment and all these things. But if there's some smaller equipment already on site, you know, maybe for that specific period, it will cultivate smaller artists beginning to create their own live experience in the real world. And I also think the grants as well, and those grants should also involve, like Steve said as well, stakeholders in the industry. I think it's not really a realistic expectation for upcoming artists to provide collateral. So maybe some other more relevant metrics can be put in place to accessing this funding and grants. So yeah, I do think, you know, supporting ecosystem in terms of your music, but also in the enabling environment. I think both things go hand in hand. So.
Thank you. One last question. I think that will go to Steve because it's very appropriate for the movie industry. What is the relationship between broadcasters and the creative? Because the creative needs a platform. We should be winding down gradually now, and I will really want to ask for the final thoughts, Ran. Then I would like the DG to give us the final thought, having one particular question or issue in mind. So Steve, you can quickly address this question while we're winding down gradually. Relationship between broadcasters and the creative because of platform.
Okay, platform, that's the platform owner on the one hand and the content owner on the other hand. I think it's that relationship is the same as with your exhibitor, is the same as with your online streamer, to the extent that you have content that they require. And usually you would go into an agreement that licenses that right to air that content to you know, the on the platform of broadcaster. That ideally is how it should be. Or if the broadcaster is approaching you to create an original content specific to them, then I would imagine then that the approach for that is totally different, and the conversation that you would have with them would include where the rights to that content that you're creating would domicile. Whether the rights would be yours and all they have is broadcast rights for a period of time, or whether you are doing a for hire job where once you finish and hand over everything to them, all rights now remain theirs. Those are the sort of things that you would look at in managing the relationship with the broadcaster. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, most broadcasters have stood reason on its head, where essentially they're rent seeking. And so there's very little happening by way of commissions from broadcasters to producers and content producers. So usually you carry the responsibility of creating your content and coming to the broadcaster and paying for airtime, as it were, so you can place your content, and whatever commercial derivatives come from that, totally all of it goes to you because you have paid rent you know, for that specific period of time that your content is on the platform. So on the one hand, usually the ideal thing is A, you have content that the broadcaster wants, they pay for the rights and then they can air it, or B, they commission you to produce something for them, and when you do, the rights, either depending on the nature of the negotiation, the rights either revert to you or you keep the rights, or they own everything and you hand everything over to them. Or you produce your content and pay for the airtime that they have, and you place your content for it on that time belt, and everything that accrues to it is totally yours. That's sort of the nature of relationships with broadcasters in Nigeria. But in the international realm, they acquire the rights to your content. This usually is for a specific period of time, either 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years. And whether it's exclusive rights they're acquiring for the period, or you know, it's just the rights to air, but doesn't preclude you selling to anybody else in that territory. And usually, again, it's territorial in nature, either country specific or region specific. or worldwide rights, depending on the footprint of that particular broadcaster. So again, it's always relative in terms of who the broadcaster you're dealing with is and what works. But the first one is what happens in Nigeria. The second one is what happens ideally globally.
Well, thanks. You know, that makes me think about the ongoing debate about the new broadcast code. I think we should do something about that. We should do a webinar around that. That is very topical. Thank you very much, Steve. Final thoughts. Final thoughts, 1 minute each. Any final thoughts on this whole conversation we've had on copyright and the creative industry from different perspectives? I'll round up with the DG who will give us a final thought. Taking into consideration the issue of policy or regulatory intervention to protect and mitigate the impact of COVID on the creative community through specific or tailor-made regulatory and policy intervention, anything specific. You know, IP offices all around the world have been doing that in different areas, trademark, patent registry, extending time for registrations and filing, issuance of compulsory licensing, KKMH. So anything specific or general from NCC in that regard, targeted at mitigating the effect of COVID for your public, which is the creative industry. But final thought, I will start with, let me go with Wale now. No, sorry, let me go with Kike. I'll be random this time. 1 minute, just final thoughts.
Yes, I think I'm not sure that I have any more substantively to add. I'm really grateful to have been able to participate again. And I think my main final thought would be, you know, with a view to what works for the local industry and what are the priorities necessary for the local industry and local creatives to thrive. And I think, you know, it is definitely good and instructive to look at what may have worked in the US, what may have worked in the UK, what may have worked elsewhere, but ultimately what will work best will come from the local stakeholders who actually have skin in the game in the local industry. So I'm really excited to see how it develops, and I'm also just excited to continue as a member of the diaspora consuming content in the hopes that the content creators are getting properly and fairly compensated.
Wale, final thoughts.
I think my own main thought is just that, you know, key advice I would give to younger artists and people coming up is that as they continue to build their catalog and sell music, they need to start building their own audiences. You can't depend on other people or platforms to create opportunities for you. And COVID has shown us that it's no longer sustainable in the long term. So as you grow, just invest in yourself. You know, you need to engage your fans regularly, build community, and also think outside the box to develop ways to cultivate that community. I think those would be the key things. There's a lot of tools, technology available. It's a tedious, long road to continue to invest in yourself, but I think in the long term, it's what puts you in good stead in situations like this, you know. So yeah, that would be my main thought. And just to say thank you for everybody. I've really learned a lot being a part of this panel discussion. And yeah, and thank you for all the amazing people who came in and asked questions.
We have almost 100 people here with us on this panel. So you're speaking to basically the whole world. Steve, final thoughts.
Okay, my final thoughts. First, you know, thank you for having me on this panel. It's been insightful, so I'm happy to have been here to learn what I've learned here today. What I would say is that my observation, particularly within the film and TV industry, is that there is an awareness of what copyright is and the importance of copyright, and sometimes an understanding of what the embedded rights are within each IP. But I think that there's an attitudinal problem. So the attitude to copyright from the industry is very loose. To the extent that most people don't even begin to look at what the rights are or what is even in the contract until there is a problem. And some people don't even register the IP to even start with. So there's a need for that attitude to change. And I think that to help with that, I would like to look to the DG to say, is it possible to look at organizing something that engages the industry, not just about understanding, IP and appreciating IP, but that would look to change attitudes where that is concerned, and to realize that that is not something you just download a contract from somewhere and sign. There is a need to actually engage the appropriate IP lawyers that fully understand what the conversations are. It's really quite large and mostly sometimes convoluted in today's world, just what the rights are and where they are and how you manage them. And having someone who totally understands that is very important, is as important as you dealing with your script, your cast, and everybody else. So maybe the DG can look to that, and that would be something that would be a great service to the industry. Thank you very much.
I will go to Fosa now, but just before that, Orella should just wait, to take over from Fosa. Final thoughts from Fosa. Orella, I would like you to think about what we were discussing last night over the email, the intermediaries. Maybe you have something to just drop along that line from the US perspective. Fosa.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for this panel. It's a great honor to be on this panel. But because of them, there's the higher share, and Africa is uniquely positioned when at very devalued. It's before we were ignorant, but it's now on us to be very aware of the value that our IP has. Now there's a big market for Black Lives Matter, black, and everything black, and all the funds coming in. So there's going to be a huge struggle for market share, and it's important that as content owners, as IP owners, we need to think like culture custodians and have ownership to our culture, because it's to be sad that what will happen in another 50 years is that we've sold off all our rights to this struggle of market share, thinking that they care about you, which they don't care about us. So a lot of us have to go back and build tailor-made solutions for sustainable wealth creation for every creative in the industry. And this charge is especially to lawyers. Every lawyer out there specialized in this industry. I'm employing us, to go home and use this period to think deep and hard to create tailor-made solutions for our stakeholders in this industry, so that history will be kind to us, that we did something for our generation. Thank you.
That was wonderful, very inspiring there. Orella, Prof will come next after Orella. Orella, your final thoughts for a minute.
Right, and you threw me this huge topic right at the end that our office just produced a 200-page report on. So if anybody wants to read about intermediary liability and safe harbors, they can go to the U.S. Copyright Office website and take the rest of July to read that. But just to touch on it briefly, because you did ask and because it is so important. Getting the intermediary liability right is very critical for facilitating that digital ecosystem. The DG talked about how the higher levels sent the bill back because they wanted stronger punishment. Kike mentioned the need to not just focus on enforcement, but also focus on facilitating the market. And I think this is a key area that really shows that, where the lawmakers are still focused on that enforcement aspect. This bill is also introducing that intermediary liability and the safe harbors for Nigeria that are going to be so critical in really building a functioning digital marketplace for all the content. So the lawmakers need to not just look at that enforcement stick, but also look at what they're putting in place for that and make sure that that comes out right. I won't even try to opine on what's in the bill. Like I said, our opinion on what's on our own law that's been in existence for 20 years is 200 pages long. So that's what I'll put out on that big topic. Overall, I want to say thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I'm very honored to be part of the panel. It's been a very insightful conversation, I think, and also very encouraging. I really see that opportunity that Professor Yemi was talking about, not just from the conversations of the panelists, but from the attendees, seeing who's joined, seeing the comments and the questions. We've been talking about how it takes an entire ecosystem. We need that whole ecosystem to be functioning. It's not just the artists, the producers, but investors, accountants, the on-the-ground attorneys, and the regulators. And seeing the interest in the questions, we can see that there's a future where people are interested in all of those areas. So I just want to encourage everybody who's been part of this to find your role in that place and work from where your role is on building that ecosystem.
Professor Yemi Arowolo, your final thoughts. Professor
Okay.
Arowolo,
I'm here, yeah. Since the DG will speak on the law, I'll just like to tell those in the entertainment industry that you can't continue to wait for COVID-19 to go away. You need to use COVID-19 to make economic sense, and you can. There are great opportunities out there. Thank you.
DG, your final thoughts and the wrap up. Just before that, my DG is done. After DG, I'm going to hand over to our host. After the DG's final thoughts is the managing partner of LNA, who will give the vote of thanks and wrap up. So DG, your final thoughts.
Well, thank you very much, DG. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience, and I must thank LNA for these well-organized, well-moderated webinar. It's been so relaxing, and for me, I have learned a lot. It's always good to listen to the experts in the field, and then you have a good feel of what you really need to do. And I hope the organizers will help us and keep us in the loop so that even after this, we can exchange our contacts and then take some of the issues forward. Secondly, I also think we've learned a lot of lessons from the COVID, and post-lockdown, we should be informed by some of these lessons. Now, the COVID will go away, certainly, but the new normal would have changed the way we do business, and people have learned how to do business virtually, and that is going to be with us for a long while to come. So we must begin now to look at providing appropriate responses and change our models, even as administrators and regulators. One of the things I took away from what Steve said and Kike is that we shouldn't spend so much time enforcing to the detriment of the business. So we must provide the support facility to ensure that these business models are able to run well. And I do know that a lot of the artists, musicians know what to do. All they want is for government to provide the enabling environment, and we commit to that as much as we can. Finally, I do know that from the lessons of the COVID pandemic and what we're going through, there's going to be need to further interrogate the copyright system, both at the global level and at the national level. It's very obvious that what the models will be running with for centuries has to change. And that is one of the things I think as a country, we should begin to work towards and find local solutions while we await the global response in terms of the policy directions going forward post-COVID. Well, outside, I thank you so much for this wonderful time. I thank LNA once again and the panelists for such an enriching session with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you there, DG. It's not my job to thank anybody here. Otherwise, I'll be breaking the law here, and my boss here will query me. So I can't. I'm barred from thanking anybody here. But this is the end of our conversation. It's been quite interesting, very stimulating, very engaging, very relaxing, to use DG's word. And I think this issue will be interrogated further on different perspectives. We're going to come with the film industry, but the broadcast controversy, the music, and the entire IP landscape as a specialized IP law firm. So I will hand over to Mr. Lawi to do the vote of thanks and wrap up.
I'm a bit overwhelmed. I mean, for years we've been talking about, can you all hear me? Yes, for years we've been talking about doing a couple of seminars and stuff, and as it is, I mean, webinars are now the in thing, and COVID has made us finally put our first one together. We have a lot more to do. As I said, when we started this, I didn't actually know what to expect from this panel, and I must say it's been an amazing panel. And then also the attendees, the amount of questions that kept coming in and chats and everything. It's amazing how interactive it has been. The response, you know, as I said, I'm totally like overwhelmed. Definitely, we're going to do more. Looking at the panelists, I mean, I think we can even have a webinar on each person that is in this panel. So we can have a webinar around the DG, one round Wale, one round Steve, Orella. I mean, Foza. Foza has grown. Foza is amazing. I mean, I knew Foza when she got out of school, and what I'm hearing coming out from her is just great stuff. I mean, it shows that the industry has grown. We've been doing this as a firm for a long time, but there are loads of people out there. I mean, I learned so much sitting here. I thought I would just come in, start the program, and then maybe go mute, put my camera off, but I've just been totally stuck in, you know. I mean, I've been stuck in. I mean, Kike, we need to talk. Got a lot to learn from you, everybody. I am so happy. I'm glad we did this, and definitely we're going to do one pretty soon. There's a lot of issues that were thrown up, and from collective administration to publishing to broadcasting, I think we would look in that direction for the next one, but I'll leave that to my partner, Professor Orowolo. Everybody's a partner in my office, just me. I mean, sorry, everybody's a professor in my office, just me. I guess I should start working on that. Yemi, we have to start working on me being a professor. Anyway, most importantly, the DG, Mr. Sain, just want to confirm that we are fully behind you as a firm. Our relationship goes back a long way. From I don't need to say it, you know. So definitely we've got your back. Let me put it that way. We've got your back. Before my back office mutes me, let me just say thank you all. Thank you, attendees. Thank you so much for taking part in this. Definitely, we're going to come back, and some of you are going to probably have to come back anyway. So I hope you would honor us at that time. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to say, I think, well, we've put this to an end. Before, Prof, is there anything I've missed? Yep. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good afternoon.